legendary motion picture conglomerate, Columbia Pictures Studios. Founded in 1919 as Cohn Brand Cohn, or CBC Film Sales, by Harry Cohn, his brother Jack, and a partner Joe Brandt, the company released its first feature film in 1922. Joe Brandt, along with Jack Cohn, handled sales, marketing, and distribution from the company's New York offices, while Harry ran the production end in Los Angeles. Many of the studio's early productions, such as the Hallroom Boys features, were low-budget affairs. Laughed at and touted by the other studios, many joked that the CBC moniker stood for corned beef and cabbage. In 1924, reorganization took place. Partner Joe Brandt's share of the company was acquired by Harry, and the Cohn brothers renamed the company Columbia Pictures Corporation. With Jack Cohn remaining in New York as vice president in charge of sales and marketing, and Harry Cohn in Los Angeles as president and head of production. Also during this time, Harry purchased space for the studio on North Gower Street in the 1400 block. It would be for the next 48 years that Columbia Studios would reign at this very location. Helping Columbia's climb to a studio to be reckoned with was the arrival of an ambitious director in the person of Frank Capra. Capra was hired by Cohn in 1927, and for the next 12 years he would direct a number of box office hits which would solidify Columbia's status as a motion picture studio. Such films included It Happened One Night, Lost Horizon, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the former starring up-and-coming film idol Clark Gable, who at the time was a contract player for another studio, MGM. The film was an Oscar winner for 1934. Columbia could not afford to keep a huge roster of contract stars, so they usually borrowed from other studios. It did, however, sign several stars to long-term contracts, such as Gene Arthur, Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell, Glenn Ford, and Rita Hayworth. In addition, Columbia produced a long string of short-subject films featuring the likes of Buster Keaton, Andy Clyde, and most notably the Three Stooges, who were the longest-lasting of the shorts, having filmed nearly 200 as such from 1934 until 1958. Columbia was also into movie serials, or low-budget B films, such as the Blondie films based on a comic strip character, and the Boston Blackie series, starring Chester Morris. Harry Cohn, as Columbia's studio boss, was known for his rude, crude, and intimidating manner. He would often scream and curse at actors, directors, and producers alike. Although he was respectful of talent, he let his employees know who was boss. His credo was, "I don't get ulcers, I give them." He was also notorious for firing studio employees for the slightest transgression, and suspending actors for their refusal to take a film role. Cohn and his brother Jack, who remained in New York, kept a lifelong enmity. Although they screamed and swore at each other endlessly, both were formidable when it came to the good of Columbia Pictures. Columbia was the only studio to keep a healthy balance sheet during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The larger studios, such as Warner Brothers, MGM, and Paramount, all lost money during this time. Harry Cohn closely monitored the budgets of his films, and the studio got the maximum use out of costly sets and props by reusing them in other films, thanks to their efficient recycling policy. In 1948, an antitrust court decision forced the larger studios to divest themselves of the movie theater chains they owned. In the wake of such, Columbia, which did not own movie theaters, was now on equal terms with the bigger studios, thus becoming one of the Big Five, the other four being MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Universal. Also in that year, with the implementation of a new medium, television, Columbia formed its own TV subsidiary, Screen Gems, which became a major producer of television programs, such as Father Knows Best, The Donna Reed Show, Dennis the Menace, Playhouse 90, and several others. The The 1950s saw a decline in the major studios, but Columbia continued to improve its status. The studio produced a number of blockbuster films in this decade, such as From Here to Eternity, On the Waterfront, and The Bridge on the River Kwai. The decade also saw the discontinuance of the short subjects and series films such as the Blondie, Boston Blackie features, as well as the Three Stooges. It was also in this decade the studio bosses met their mortality. Jack Cohn, Columbia's vice president, passed away in 1956. Although he and his brother Harry were never on good footing from a social standpoint, Harry deeply mourned his brother's passing. Harry Cohn, the studio's big boss, died in 1958. His well-attended funeral was held at Columbia Studios stages 12 and 14. There is no stage 13. Given his meanness, so hated and feared was he by many that it is said that the reason for the big turnout at his funeral was that so people could actually make sure he was dead. Even after his death, he was still feared. By the 1960s, Columbia, in the post-Harry Cohn era, became ambiguous, offering films such as A Man for All Seasons, Oliver, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Many television series were produced on the lot, such as Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, The Monkees, and several others. The 1969 cult film Easy Rider was a runaway hit for the studio. However, Columbia was losing millions of dollars at a fast pace. Nearly bankrupt by 1970, Columbia brought in new management, and in 1972, to save money, Columbia sold its 14-acre film lot on Gower Street and moved from its longtime home, relocating to the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank. It would later move again, this time to the Sony Pictures, former MGM Studios in Culver City, where it remains today. In 1974, Columbia retired the Screen Gems name from its TV subsidiary, renaming it Columbia Pictures Television. Having been in the hands of several owners over the decades, Columbia's Lady with the Torch has stood through it all, and her torch still burns brighter than ever today. Columbia's old home on Gower Street is now the Sunset Gower Studios, becoming a facility for independent film companies. Also, several television series were and still are produced here, such as The Golden Girls, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Judge Judy, Private Practice, and Deal or No Deal. And that is the conclusion of the history of Columbia Studios. Thanks for tuning in.